In this video, I'm going to talk about a little more about the semiconducting material and the doping and p-n junction. So in the previous video, I already talked about semiconducting material, but I'll talk a little more here. A semiconducting material is nothing but it has 4 electrons in its outermost orbit, and at the same time it has it allow current sometimes, does not allow current sometimes, based on the external conditions. So if you give more temperature, that means you're giving more energy, act like a conductor. Sometimes if it doesn't have that energy, act like a insulator. So the best semiconducting materials, we know silicon and germanium. Silicon is more common because it's cheaper, it is available. Silicon is nothing but sand basically. So it has 14 electrons. So out of 14, 10 are inside. The first orbit has 2 electrons, second one has 8. So the remaining 4 are going to be outside of that orbit, the outer orbit. Now when it comes to the band, so when we look too deep into this band, very close, we will see valency band and conduction band. So all the electrons are in the valency band. These 4 electrons are going to be in the valency band. They need some energy to jump into the conduction band. So that energy we are giving it by, so silicon needs 1.14 electron volt. Electron volt is the small unit for the energy. Usually energy used in joules, measured in joules. Okay, silicon has silicon needs 1.14 electron volt. Germanium needs 0.67 electron volt to jump this gap. Okay, move the electrons from valency band to conduction band. So germanium need less energy, but silicon is available more abundant, and more quantity is available, at the same time cheaper. So that's the reason we use silicon a lot. Okay, now you know the Silicon Valley in California, because all the electronic industry there, they use silicon as their base material. So that's the reason we call that a Silicon Valley. Now doping is nothing but, see, if you look at, most of the times we heard that word from athletes, that athlete used, or he used dope, he's doped. Doped means basically we add very small quantity of drugs to our body, right? That's what doping is. So a drug is basically nothing but an impurity. So adding impurities to a pure semiconducting material is nothing but the doping. Doping is called adding a small quantity of impurity to a pure semiconducting material is called doping. So once we doped, there are 2 types of materials we can get. One is p-type semiconducting material. P is nothing but positive. Okay, p-type semiconducting material and n-type semiconducting material. So those are the 2 types of semiconducting material. So P is nothing but positive, N is nothing but negative. Now, say for example, you have silicon atom. Silicon has how many electrons in its outermost orbit? 14. So if you look phosphorus has 15 electrons in its outermost orbit. Okay, what I'm going to do, we're going to add a very small quantity of, so phosphorus has 15 because silicon has 14. So if you look at phosphorus, 15 electrons. So here is my phosphorus. It has 2 electrons in its outermost orbit, in the first orbit, and 8 in the second, 8 electrons. Now the outermost orbit has 5 electrons. So the 4 electrons are going to make bond with the other silicon atoms. So here is a silicon atom. So these 2 are going to make bond. Another silicon atom here. So these 4 electrons are going to make bond with all the silicon atoms. But still the phosphorus has 1 extra electron, right? The 5th electron. That 5th electron is free to move. So now when it comes to the, when I add the phosphorus, which is a pentavalent means 5 valence electrons. When I add a pentavalent semiconducting material to a pure semiconducting material, I see more number of electrons in that semiconducting material. So here is a pure silicon. I'll just add very small quantity of phosphorus that will give me very high number of electrons. Okay, so now this material becomes negatively charged. That means it has more number of free electrons. That is the reason we call this as N-type semiconducting material. Okay, that is N-type. When it comes to P-type semiconducting material, so P-type, same thing. This is, N-type, pentavalent. Pentavalent means 5 electrons. Now I'm going to add very small quantity of trivalent. Okay, trivalent means only 3 electrons in its outermost orbit. So if I take aluminum, okay, aluminum has 13, so basically it has 3 electrons in its outermost orbit. So the 3 electrons are going to make bond with the other silicon atoms. Okay, and now it needs there is a hole for another silicon atom. Okay, so here there is a electron and hole pair, electron pair, electron pair, and electron pair. Okay, so there is a hole, there is nothing in here, we call that as a hole. Okay, HOLE. So the hole doesn't have any charge, but to make it opposite charge to the negative charge, we call that as it has positive charge. So when I add a trivalent impurity to a pure semiconducting material, we will see lots of holes. As I said, the holes we're going to say positive charge for time being. Okay, so that's the reason we call this as P-type semiconducting material and N-type semiconducting material. That's the P-type and N-type semiconducting material. Now we're going to talk about PN junction. This PN junction is also called diode. PN junction is also called diode. The symbol for diode is, this is the symbol for diode. These two are called anode. This is called cathode. Now the PN junction is created by using P-type semiconducting material and N-type semiconducting material. So this is P-type, N-type. So here we know that a P-type has lots of holes, okay, and N-type has lots of electrons. Okay, when we mix them together, what happens at this point? This is called junction. Okay, that point is called junction. What happens at the junction? Here you can see these holes and the electrons nearby, they're going to combine. Okay, so the holes and the electrons are going to be combined in the middle. Okay, now it's kind of act like a barrier. Okay, so here you have positive charges, holes, and here you have more negative charges. Okay, basically we know that if you have positive charges and negative charges separated, even as I mentioned, the holes doesn't have any charges, still the electric field is going to be there inside this barrier. Okay, this is the electric field. So this electron needs some energy to jump from there to this hole. Now if I connect this electron, oh, by the way, these are the majority carriers. So these electrons are majority carriers in the N-type. Holes are the majority carriers in P-type, but at the same time there will be small quantity of electrons here and there. So these electrons are going to move from one place to another place. Same thing here. So when it comes to N-type material, there are millions of electrons, but maybe thousands of holes are going to be there. Okay, so that's a PN junction. Now I'm going to connect a P-type material with positive and N-type material with negative. What happens? This one has negative charge, this one has negative charge. So these electrons are going to be pushed towards the junction, and these are the positive charges, and I connected to positive. So I'm connecting a battery to the PN junction diode. So what happens? This is positively charged, so positives can reflect, reflect each other. So these holes are going to move towards the junction, electrons are moving towards the junction. So at 1 voltage, that voltage needed is around less than 0.7 volt. So if this voltage is above 0.7 volt, this junction will disappear and current will start flowing in this diode, in that PN junction. Okay, PN junction is also called diode, PN junction diode. Some people call this as PN junction diode or PN junction or diode, everything is same. This is called forward biased. Okay, bias is nothing but we are making it conduct. I mean, bias is nothing but we are giving some external input to that junction. Now if I make this reverse, so here is my p-type material, here is my n-type material. So if I make this reverse, so that means I have negative here, positive there, PN junction. So here I have holes. What happens? I have negatives there, so these will attract. So these holes are going to move away. Same thing here, electrons are going to move away towards the positive. So the junction is going to become bigger and bigger. So now it cannot conduct energy because the junction is not allowing current. Okay, so in forward biased condition, the PN junction diode allows current. In reverse biased condition, it does not allow current. So the symbol for diode is anode and cathode. Whenever we connect positive to anode, so anode voltage must be higher than the cathode to conduct the current. So current is going to flow in this direction, but the current never flow in this direction. It is always 0 amperes. Act like a open switch. This act like a closed switch. In ideal case, we always assume that this voltage drop across this diode is 0 volts, but in practical case it's 0.7. So when I draw a VI characteristics, so here is my voltage and current passing through the diode. Okay, so here is positive voltage, 1 volt, 2 volt, 3 volt, 4 volt, 5 volt, milliampere, 1 2 3 4 5 6 in milliampere. Okay, so whenever in the forward biased condition, so basically when I connect my diode positive to the anode, negative to the cathode, okay, ideal case this must be like this right away. But when it comes to the practical case, as I mentioned, it needs a little voltage. Okay, so I mean this could be like 0.7, so I would say 1 is right there, that should be 0.7 right there. Okay, so this is forward biased condition. Now when it comes to the reverse biased, so if I connect my diode in the opposite side, that is reverse biased. So in reverse biased condition, doesn't matter how much voltage you give, the current should be 0. So the ideal case, the current is going to be 0. But when it comes to the practical case, there will be some leakage current because of the minority carriers. Okay, and then at one point what happens, it will permanently damage. So if I give more and more voltage here, it will permanently damage the diode. So the current diodes we see in the market probably around 50 volt, 20 volt, 40 volts, 30 volts, something like that. The power electronics diodes, most probably they can handle up to 200 volts or 200 volts, 400 volts, something like that. Okay, so that's what about the diode. So what we learned about the diode is made up of p-type material and n-type material together. We call it as PN junction. It allows current in only one direction, and in practical case there is a 0.7 volts voltage drop across the diode in forward biased condition. In reverse biased condition, it will act like open switch, and it does not allow any current in the reverse biased condition. If you apply more and more voltage at one point, it will permanently damaged. Okay, I'll stop this video here. Probably I'll make one more video based on the ideal diode, and then I'll move on to the examples. Thank you.